I was halfway down the apartment stairs, hoodie half-zipped, grocery list sticking out of my back pocket, when I heard someone say my name. Ethan. Not loud. Not urgent. Just deliberate. I froze on the middle landing and looked back up. Mason stood in his doorway, one hand braced casually against the frame, like he'd been standing there longer than he wanted to admit. His dark hair was damp, curling slightly near his temples, and he wore a simple gray t-shirt that clung just enough to show the way his chest rose with each breath. His eyes, those quiet, unreadable hazel eyes, held mine a second too long. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice normal, though something in his tone had already unsettled me. He tilted his head slightly. "You heading out somewhere?" I held up the empty tote bag at my side. "Just to the market. Out of coffee." His lips twitched like he almost smiled. "Almost. That's a crime." I chuckled softly. "Trust me, I feel the punishment." Mason's fingers tapped once against the door frame before he stepped back, pushing the door open fully. "Can you come in for a second?" "A second." He said it lightly, but his voice had a weight to it, a heaviness I wasn't used to hearing from him. Mason was the type of neighbor who kept his world neat, quiet, and tightly controlled. We'd lived across the hall from each other for nearly a year, exchanged polite conversation, borrowed a tool or two, shared the occasional elevator ride. But he was always reserved. Not cold exactly. Just careful. And careful people didn't usually say, "Come in," without thinking. Sure," I said slowly. He stepped aside, letting me walk past him. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt him behind me, close enough that I sensed the warmth of him before he shut the door softly. I don't know why the quiet click of the latch sent a small shiver down my spine. His apartment looked the same as always, tidy, minimalist, everything in its place. But tonight something felt different. Maybe the lighting. Maybe him. Maybe the way the air felt warmer the second the door closed. "You good?" I asked. Mason didn't answer right away. He rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling slowly, like he had rehearsed something and then forgotten all the lines. "Sorry," he said finally. "I know this is random." "It's okay," I said. "What's up?" He met my eyes. And for a heartbeat, maybe two, everything felt still. He hesitated, searching for words. "Didn't want to be here alone right now." It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Quiet. Raw around the edges. Honest. "That's okay," I murmured. He nodded, as if relieved I hadn't questioned it further. "You can put your bag down," he added softly. "If you want." I set the tote gently on the couch. Mason walked a few steps into the living room, hands in his pockets, gaze drifting to the window like he wasn't sure how to start. I'd never seen him like this. Usually he was composed, steady, someone who seemed to move through the world with quiet control. But tonight he looked like someone who'd been holding up walls for too long and was suddenly too tired to keep them straight. I took a careful step closer. "Did something happen?" His jaw clenched for a second. "Not exactly." "Then what made you call me over?" He glanced at me again, and the look he gave me, it was different. Like he was trying to hide something behind a layer of calm he couldn't quite maintain. Like he was weighing whether he should let me see something beneath the surface. He swallowed. "I saw you leaving," he said quietly. "And I didn't want the night to go by without." "I don't know." His words drifted off, unfinished. But the meaning lingered. "You didn't want the silence," I said softly. He nodded once. "Yeah." I eased onto the couch. "Well, you're not alone." He sat on the opposite end at first, giving me space, but his body angled toward me unconsciously. His knee brushed the cushion closer to mine. His fingers tapped his thigh restlessly. He kept glancing at me, quick, almost shy glances, but not like someone checking in. More like someone studying something they weren't supposed to look at too long. "How was your day?" I asked gently, hoping to ease whatever tension sat heavy on him. "Long?" he murmured. Loud. "You ever have one of those days where everything feels a few degrees off and you can't figure out why?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes the smallest things throw everything off." His eyes flicked up, holding mine for a few seconds too long. "Yeah. Something like that." We sat in quiet after that. Not awkward. Not empty. Just full. His breathing seemed to slow once I was there. His shoulders relaxed. Even the restless tapping of his fingers softened. I never realized how closely I'd begun paying attention to him until tonight. At one point, he leaned back against the couch cushion, exhaling a breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. "It's weird," he said softly. "I'm not really the type who calls people over." "Then why'd you do it?" I asked. He blinked slowly, hesitating. Then he said the quietest truth I'd ever heard from him. Because I wanted you to stay for a little bit. Something tugged at my chest. Not sharp. Not sudden. Just a slow, warm pull. I didn't move. I couldn't. Okay, I whispered. I'll stay. Mason nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like he'd been bracing himself for the opposite answer. His gaze dropped to my hands resting on my knees. And when he looked back up, something unspoken, something neither of us had dared to name, hung in the air between us. Something that felt like the beginning of a shift. A slow, quiet, inevitable shift. Outside, a car passed down the street, headlights casting two soft streaks across his living room wall before fading away. Inside, Mason breathed out quietly. Thanks, he said, his voice steadier now. For not walking away. I didn't tell him the truth, that I hadn't even considered walking away. His eyes lingered on mine a second longer than they should have. And in that moment I realized something. The way he looked at me wasn't the way neighbors look at each other. It wasn't the way acquaintances look at each other. It was something else. Something he wasn't ready to say. Something I wasn't ready to name. Something quietly brewing beneath the surface. And when he finally leaned back, letting out a breath that sounded like relief, I knew. The night wasn't going to be ordinary. Not anymore. I didn't mean to stay as long as I did. 30 minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into 2. And somehow, without either of us acknowledging it out loud, Mason and I had drifted from opposite ends of the couch to the middle, close enough that the heat from his arms seeped into mine whenever he shifted. Close enough that if I breathed in too deeply, I would have inhaled the faint scent of his detergent on his shirt. Close enough to feel something I kept telling myself I shouldn't feel. The room was dim except for the soft glow of the lamp beside us. Mason had turned on some quiet music. Nothing distracting, just soft instrumentals that made the silence between us feel warmer instead of empty. He sat slightly turned toward me, elbow on the back of the couch, fingers lightly brushing the fabric near my shoulder every now and then. Not intentional touches. Not obvious ones. But the kind that happened because he wasn't pulling away either. So, I said eventually, my voice low, do you still feel off? He exhaled, slow and steady. A little less now. What changed? He hesitated before answering. You're here. The words shouldn't have hit the way they did, but they did, right in the center of my chest. I tried to swallow the sudden tightness in my throat, but it didn't budge. Well, I said lightly, I'm glad I could help. He shook his head slightly. It's not that simple, Ethan. Something in his tone made my breath catch. Before I could ask what he meant, Mason tilted his head and studied me, really studied me, with an intensity so quiet and steady it almost made me look away. You didn't? I didn't? And neither of us pretended nothing was happening. You ever notice, he said softly, how comfortable it is between us? My heart skipped. Comfortable? Yeah. His gaze didn't waver. Like, familiar. Easy. Natural. I forced a small smile. I mean, we've lived across the hall for a while. That's not what I mean. His voice was calm, but something in it felt like a door slowly creaking open. Something he wasn't sure he should reveal but couldn't keep closed anymore. I held his gaze, pulse picking up. Then what do you mean? He breathed out quietly through his nose. I don't know how to say it without sounding weird. Try me. Mason shifted slightly closer. Not by much, just an inch or two, but it sent a wave of heat across my skin. His knee brushed mine. And this time he didn't move away. Okay, he murmured, eyes flicking briefly to my lips before returning to my eyes. Have you ever been around someone and felt like there's something there but neither person wants to be the first to admit it? My breath stalled. I wasn't sure I could answer without giving myself away. But Mason didn't wait for a reply. He rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling. That's what it feels like. With you. Silence wrapped around us, thick, heavy but not frightening. Just real. Too real. My voice came out quieter than I meant. Mason. He shook his head slightly. You don't have to say anything. I'm not trying to make things weird between us. You're not, I said quickly, too quickly. It's just unexpected. Unexpected for you? He asked gently. Or unexpected that I said it first? I felt the truth clawing at the inside of my chest, begging to be let out. But if I let it out, nothing would be the same. Before I could form an answer, Mason leaned back slightly, eyes searching mine with a softness that knocked the air out of my lungs. You're important to me, he said quietly. More than I probably have the right to admit. I stared at him, stunned. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He wasn't testing me. He meant it. The room felt smaller, warmer, closer. I swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this now? Because tonight made it obvious. He paused. You walking away would have felt wrong. Like something unfinished. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. He shifted closer again. Barely. Just enough that his thigh pressed against mine completely now. No accidental brush, no hesitation. It was intentional. Mason, I whispered. He held my gaze, steady and unblinking. Tell me I'm imagining this. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. Because I couldn't lie. Not with him looking at me like that. He noticed the silence. The hesitation. The truth I couldn't hide. A slow, nearly invisible breath escaped him. Something between relief and realization. I knew it, he whispered. I looked down at our legs touching, at the tiny inch of space that used to exist between us but was gone now because neither of us had moved away. Maybe we just got too close, I said softly. And now we don't know how to pretend it's nothing. Mason lowered his gaze, a quiet, almost painful smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, he murmured. Too close to be nothing. He said it like it was a truth he'd been carrying for a long time. The air shifted, thickened, warmed. I didn't know who moved first, him or me, but suddenly we were leaning toward each other by degrees so small they were almost unnoticeable until they weren't. His arm brushed mine. His shoulder angled toward me. His breath exhaled softly against my cheek. Not touching. Not quite. But close enough to feel everything. Close enough to know he felt it too. He stopped with his face inches from mine, eyes searching me carefully, giving me room to pull away if I wanted. I didn't. He whispered, Ethan, tell me to stop. But the way he said it, the softness, the almost shaky edge, it wasn't a warning. It was a confession. I'm not going to tell you that, I breathed. His eyes softened. I was hoping you'd say that. The world around us blurred. The couch. The lamp. The soft music. Everything faded until all I could feel was him. He didn't close the distance. Not yet. Not fully. He just stayed there, so close his forehead almost brushed mine, breathing me in like he needed the air I breathed out. Mason, I whispered. He closed his eyes for a second, steadying himself. Yeah. What happens now? He opened his eyes again and the way he looked at me. God, it was enough to undo me completely. I don't know, he said softly. But I don't think I can go back to pretending. Neither could I. Not after this. Not after him. Not after the way he was looking at me like I was the thing he'd been trying not to want. He leaned in, slowly, carefully, almost cautiously, and for a moment the tension between us felt like a wire pulled impossibly tight. But he didn't kiss me. He just rested his forehead lightly against mine, breathing me in, letting the moment hold itself. Too close to be nothing. And definitely too close to go back. The moment Mason rested his forehead against mine, the entire world seemed to narrow to a point, just the two of us breathing the same trembling air. But nothing happened. No kiss. No dramatic confession. Just closeness. Soft, confusing, terrifying closeness. And then, slowly, he pulled back, not far, just enough to sit upright again, his arm brushing mine as he settled. His eyes darted away for the first time that night, and I watched something shift behind them. A flicker of realization. Maybe fear. Maybe the same fear twisting quietly in my chest. He ran his hand through his hair. Sorry? That was a lot. It wasn't too much, I said softly. He glanced at me almost like he didn't believe I meant it. But I did. God, I did. Mason leaned back into the couch, letting his head rest against the wall behind it. He stared toward the ceiling like it held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. I don't know what I'm doing, he murmured. I don't know what this is. The honesty in his voice hit harder than anything else he'd said all night. I swallowed. We don't have to call it anything. Yeah, he said quietly. But not calling it something doesn't mean it isn't there. He was right. And hearing him admit it, say it out loud, made something settle deep inside me, like a truth that had been floating finally found a place to land. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, yes, but not suffocating. More like a blanket that settled over both of us, warm but overwhelming. I didn't want it to end. But I didn't know what to say either. So I let it sit between us, hoping he'd understand what I couldn't find the words for. He broke it first. You ever feel like you're standing on the edge of something, and if you move even a little bit, everything changes? His voice was almost whisper soft. I nodded. Yeah, I feel that right now. He looked over again, really looked like he was searching for confirmation in my expression. Something must have reassured him because he let out a shaky breath and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I didn't plan any of this, he said quietly. I didn't ask you to come in so this could happen. I know. And I did. You just needed company. I needed you, he corrected softly. My heart stumbled over itself. He looked almost embarrassed by his own honesty, like the words slipped before he could stop them. But instead of taking them back, he held them there between us, like he wanted to see how I'd react. I turned slightly toward him, letting my knee rest against his again. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He looked down at where our knees touched, then back at me, and something in his face softened, something almost fragile. There was a long pause before he whispered, "Can I tell you something without you thinking differently of me?" "Yeah," I said immediately. "Always." He hesitated, really hesitated, before speaking. "Sometimes I don't know if the things I feel are okay," he admitted. "Like I'm not supposed to want certain things or feel certain things for certain people." My chest tightened. He wasn't looking at me now. He was looking at the floor, like the weight of the words kept his gaze low. "Mason," I said gently, "feelings aren't wrong." He let out a humorless breath. "Maybe not. But they can still scare the hell out of you." I moved a little closer. He noticed. "What scares you about this?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rubbed his palms against his thighs and took a long, steady breath. "You," he said finally. My breath caught. "Me?" He nodded, still not looking up. "Because nothing about you feels temporary. And the idea of messing this up, whatever this is, terrifies me." I stared at him, stunned by the honesty he was spilling into the space between us. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't even confident. It was raw. The kind of raw people only show when they trust you. "Mason," I whispered, "you're not messing anything up." He looked up finally, and the vulnerability in his eyes made my chest tighten. He looked younger somehow, not in age but in fear. "I don't know what to do with how I feel around you," he said softly. "I don't." He cut himself off, shaking his head, fingers curling into the fabric of his jeans. I reached out without thinking, just placed a hand on his forearm, warm and steady. His breath hitched. He looked down at my hand, then at me, eyes searching. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight," I said. He swallowed. "But something did happen tonight." "Yeah," I admitted, "it did." The air between us felt alive again, humming with something unspoken, something neither of us knew how to define yet. Mason leaned back slowly, eyes still fixed on mine, like he wasn't sure pulling away was the right move. I didn't let my hand fall from his arm. He didn't move it either. "I keep thinking I should say sorry," he murmured. "For what?" "For making things weird. For leaning in. For everything." I shook my head gently. "Nothing about this feels weird to me." He stared at me, eyes softening in slow motion. "Then what does it feel like?" I took a moment, breathing in the warmth between us. The quiet. The knowing. "It feels like something," I said quietly. "Something neither of us wants to pretend isn't happening." He exhaled, slow, deep, like he'd been holding that breath for too long. The room stayed quiet, but the silence had changed. It wasn't uncertain anymore. It wasn't afraid. It was aware. Both of us were. And then Mason did something small, something gentle, but something that melted the tension around my ribs. He turned his hand over, palm up, brushing the back of my fingers with his. Not holding. Not grabbing. Just reaching. Testing the air. I let my fingers shift, brushing his back. His breath caught so quietly I almost missed it. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. The silence grew warm again. Something soft, something intentional. Something new. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "If I stay close like this, will you let me?" My throat tightened. "I want you to," I whispered back. He nodded once, like he needed that confirmation more than he could admit. Then he leaned back just enough to sit comfortably, letting our hands rest lightly against each other, barely touching. Not holding. Not yet. But not pretending anymore. And in that quiet moment, in the stillness of the dim room, something settled between us. Something neither of us named but both of us felt down to the bone. Something real. Something in the silence. The quiet between us had shifted again. Not the awkward kind, not the heavy kind, just soft. Intentional. Familiar in a way that shouldn't have been possible given how new all of this was. Mason's hand still rested near mine on the couch cushion, our fingers barely touching. It wasn't a real hold. Not yet. But the contact buzzed through me like a slow electric current. He didn't look at our hands, but I could tell he felt it too by the way his breathing had changed, slow, steady, but deeper than before. Like he was trying to keep himself calm. Or keep himself here. You okay? I asked softly. He nodded once. Yeah. I don't think I've ever been this honest with someone. His voice cracked just a little at the end and something inside me tightened. Not out of pity, out of recognition. He didn't open up easily. Mason was the kind of guy who helped everyone else without ever mentioning if he needed help himself. Me tonight, the closeness, was him letting down a wall he'd held up for years. I wasn't going to take that lightly. I slid my hand forward a fraction of an inch, letting my fingers rest more fully against his. His breath hitched, barely but enough. He kept his eyes on our hands now, like the sight grounded him. You don't have to be scared, I whispered. He exhaled slowly, almost like he'd been waiting to hear that. I know, he said. But some part of me still is. I didn't pull my hand away. If anything, I shifted closer, our legs aligning again. My knee pressed lightly against his, and the tension in his shoulders eased. Not all the way, just enough that I felt him lean subtly toward me. He wasn't running from the fear. He was letting me sit with him in it. For a long, quiet moment we stayed there, our hands touching, our breaths almost sinking. I felt his fingers twitch against mine, a hesitant movement like he was thinking about holding on but wasn't sure if he should. I didn't force anything. I just let the space exist. He spoke again, voice low. Ethan? Yeah. His gaze drifted from our hands to my face. He hesitated, searching for something in my expression before asking, Can I try something? My pulse stumbled. Try what? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lifted his hand from the couch and, slowly, like he was testing the warmth of water, rested it gently against my chest. Right over my heartbeat. The touch was feather light. Barely there. But my breath caught anyway. He was feeling my heartbeat. He was feeling me. A soft, almost startled look crossed his face. You're nervous, he murmured. You're the reason, I whispered back. He huffed a tiny, breathless laugh, relieved and overwhelmed all at once. His fingers spread gently, the warmth of his palm radiating through the fabric of my shirt. I didn't think you'd let me do that, he admitted. I didn't think you'd ask. His eyes softened again, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The pressure of his hands stayed warm and steady, like he was grounding himself, memorizing the rhythm. Then something shifted just a fraction. His thumb brushed my chest, slow and unconscious. Not a caress. Not a confession. Just a touch that stayed longer than it should have. My breath shuddered. Mason. He closed his eyes briefly, like he was trying to process too many things at once. When he opened them again, they were warmer, clearer. I don't know why this means so much, he said quietly. But it does. Me too. He exhaled again, this time shakier. The hand on my chest slipped upward slightly, not higher, just closer. Closer to my shoulder, to my throat. His fingers brushed the side of my neck, and the contact made something bloom across my skin. He froze. Too much. I shook my head. No. His shoulders relaxed visibly. The pads of his fingers skimmed my skin lightly, almost reverently, like he was exploring the idea of touching me rather than actually touching me. Every inch they moved felt like a question. A test. A confession without words. He wasn't trying to be bold. He was trying to understand what this was becoming. You ever just want to stay close to someone? He whispered, voice soft. Not because you're supposed to. Just because it feels right. My throat tightened. Yeah, I do. He swallowed, thumb brushing lightly against my collarbone. That's what this feels like. His words sank into me slowly, like warm water being absorbed into dry ground. They filled cracks I hadn't realized were there. When he pulled his hand back, slowly, reluctantly, it left a trail of warmth behind, a phantom touch that lingered long after his fingers left my skin. I didn't let him get far. When his hand rested beside him again, I reached out and gently curled my fingers around it, finally closing the space he'd been too shy to bridge. Mason inhaled sharply, eyes flicking to our joined hands. His fingers tightened instinctively around mine, not forceful, just earnest. You didn't have to do that, he whispered. I wanted to. Good, he murmured, voice softer than soft. Because I wanted to too. A brief silence settled over us, not empty, not uncertain. Just quietly full. He used his free hand to rub at the back of his neck, almost embarrassed. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and realize I imagined all of this. You didn't imagine it. I know, he said, squeezing my hand gently. But it still feels unreal. I leaned slightly toward him. What do you want, Mason? He didn't hesitate this time. This, he said, squeezing our joined hands again. Whatever this is. I want more time like this. More moments like this. My heart pulled toward him like gravity. I want that too. He looked relieved, visibly relieved, like he'd been bracing for a different answer. We sat like that for a long while, hand in hand, the room warm and quiet around us. Mason shifted closer until our shoulders touched, and the contact settled into something comfortable, something easy, something that didn't feel like a mistake or a question mark anymore. The touch that stayed wasn't the one on my chest. It wasn't the hand on my neck. It wasn't even our fingers intertwined. It was the way he leaned gently against me, trusting the closeness, letting it happen, letting himself want it, letting me want him. And neither of us pulled away. Mason's shoulder stayed pressed against mine, our hands still intertwined, and the quiet of the room felt different now, full, warm, alive. The kind of silence that didn't ask for anything except honesty. I could feel his thumb brushing the side of my hand in slow, absent circles. He wasn't doing it consciously. It was the kind of touch someone made when their guard was down, when their heart was talking louder than their mind. And every tiny brush sent a small, steady ache through me, one I didn't want to ignore anymore. His voice broke the stillness first, soft and unsure. Ethan, can I ask you something? Yeah, I said gently. Anything. He took a slow breath, not looking at me yet. Are we crossing a line we shouldn't be crossing? I swallowed hard. Do you think we are? He shook his head slightly. I don't know. I just know that the second I pulled my hand away from you earlier, I wanted it back. I felt heat rise to my face. You didn't have to take it away. He finally glanced at me, eyes soft, searching, a little scared. It felt like too much. Too much how? Too much like something I've wanted for longer than I want to admit. His voice cracked just enough to make my breath catch. I didn't let go of his hand. If anything, I held it more firmly, grounding him. Mason, I said quietly, you don't have to hide that from me. For a moment he didn't speak. He just stared at our hands, his thumb still moving slowly against my skin. You make it feel easy, he admitted. I'm not trying to. I know. And that's what scares me. I furrowed my brow. Why would that scare you? He lifted his gaze again, and this time he held my eyes long enough to make my pulse stutter. Because I wasn't planning on feeling anything for anyone. Not now. Not like this. And especially not for someone who's you. My chest tightened. What does that mean? He exhaled, running his free hand through his hair. It means you matter. More than I expected. More than I know how to deal with. I shifted closer, our knees brushing again. I matter to you? His eyes darkened with something he didn't have words for yet. Yeah, he whispered. You do. The room felt too small suddenly, not in a claustrophobic way but in a way that made everything sharper, more defined. The soft lamp light touched the angle of his jaw, the faint lines beside his eyes, the rise and fall of his chest. Mason wasn't looking at the floor or the ceiling anymore. He was looking at me. Really looking. Like he was memorizing my expression, searching for hesitation, bracing for something painful. But there was no fear inside me anymore. Only clarity. I let out a breath. Can I tell you something too? He nodded almost nervously. I've been trying to pretend this is nothing, I admitted. What we're feeling. What's happening. Mason's jaw tightened, like he was preparing himself for the worst. But I can't pretend anymore, I finished. He blinked. Yeah. Yeah, I said softly. Something broke open in his expression, a crack of surprise, relief, disbelief. He shifted closer without thinking, our shoulders fully pressed now. What does that mean? He asked quietly. For you? I took another breath, steadying myself. It means, it's not nothing for me either. He inhaled like the words landed somewhere deep inside him. So, he whispered, what do we do with that? I didn't have a perfect answer. But I had honesty. I think we just let it be real, I said. He stared at me, eyes flicking between mine. What if it is real, Ethan? Then we stop pretending it isn't. Mason's breath shook visibly. He looked down at our hands again, still joined, still warm, still steady, and he lifted them slightly, bringing them closer to his chest. Our fingers tightened instinctively. I didn't think you'd say that, he said quietly. Why? Because you're you. He gave a tiny nervous laugh. You're good. Steady. You don't jump into things. You don't chase things you're unsure about. I'm not unsure about you. The confession slipped out before I had time to second guess it. Mason froze, not in fear but in stunned disbelief. He looked at me with something raw and soft and unguarded. "You're not?" he whispered. "No." He searched my face like he needed to confirm every syllable. "Then what are you feeling right now?" he asked, voice barely audible. I took a breath. Let myself feel it. Let the truth rise without fighting it. "I feel pulled to you," I said. "Like if I moved away even a little, it would hurt." He swallowed. "Art. I feel that too." "I know." His fingers tightened around mine again, slow, hesitant, but full of something real. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "Can I?" He trailed off, suddenly nervous. "Can I be closer?" "Just closer." My heart softened. "Come here." It was all he needed. Mason leaned toward me, not fast, not desperate. Just gently, like he was afraid of startling me. He rested his forehead lightly against my temple, his breath brushing my cheek. His hand didn't let go of mine. His shoulder pressed into me firmly now, grounding both of us. The moment was quiet, pure, entirely safe. I found myself whispering, "Mason?" He hummed in acknowledgement, not moving away, not breaking the closeness. "You're shaking," I murmured. "A little," he admitted, voice trembling. "Because this feels big." "It is." "And good," he whispered. "It feels really good." I nodded, my eyes slipping closed. "Yeah, it does." For a long moment, we stayed like that, our joined hands resting between us, his forehead gently against my temple, the quiet of the room wrapping around us like a blanket. Then Mason pulled back just enough to see my face. His eyes were wet. Not with tears exactly, just full. Like emotion had risen too close to the surface. He let out a shaky breath. "What if this is real, Ethan?" I reached up with my free hand and touched his cheek, barely brushing my thumb along the edge of his jaw. "It feels real to me," I whispered. He exhaled shakily, leaning into my touch the slightest bit. "Then I won't run from it." "You don't have to." "Promise." "I promise." And then he did something small, soft, unsteady. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to mine again, both of us breathing the same trembling air. Not a kiss. Not a leap. Just a surrender. The kind that only happens when something stops being a question and becomes an answer. Something real. I don't know how long Mason and I stayed there, foreheads touching, breaths tangled, hands still joined like neither of us trusted the moment enough to let it move. Time didn't feel real. Only the feeling did. Eventually he pulled back, but just barely. Our faces were still close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. His eyes searched mine with a gentleness that made my heart twist. "I didn't know I wanted this," he said softly. "Not until it was happening." I could hear the tremor in his voice, the kind that came from honesty he'd never spoken aloud before. I swallowed. "I didn't know either." He gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I admitted. "But being around you makes it feel right." Mason's shoulders dropped, like he'd been holding something heavy for too long. "I've been trying to figure out why it feels like I've been waiting for something without realizing it." And then tonight happened," he whispered, "and I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe you're it." The word struck something deep inside me, a kind of warmth that didn't flare but unfolded, slow and deliberate. I shifted closer so our knees touched again. "You didn't know you were waiting for this?" He shook his head. "I didn't know I was waiting for you." My breath caught. He said it with zero theatrics, no dramatic tension, just simple, vulnerable truth. And it landed harder because of that. I squeezed his hand gently. "I'm here," I whispered. "You don't have to wait anymore." Mason let out a breath that trembled at the end. "I don't even know what I'm doing, Ethan." "You don't have to know," I said. "We can figure it out together." He looked down at our hands and exhaled. "I keep thinking that if I move too fast, I'll mess everything up." "You won't. And if I hold back too much, I'll lose the moment." "You won't do that either." He laughed under his breath, nervous but warmer this time. "How do you always know what to say?" "I don't," I said honestly. "I'm just telling you what's true for me." He lifted his gaze again. "And what's true for you?" I took a steady breath. "That I've been lonely," I said quietly. Not in a dramatic way. Just in the ways you don't notice until someone shows up and fills the space without trying. Mason's expression softened completely, open, unguarded, almost tender. "I don't want to be someone who fills space for you," he said. "I want to be someone who matters." "You already are." His lips parted slightly, like the words hit him deeper than he expected. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full, full of all the things neither of us knew how to name yet. After a moment, Mason leaned back slightly and wiped his palms on his jeans with an embarrassed laugh. I feel like my whole body's buzzing. Good buzzing? I asked gently. He nodded. Yeah. It's like being nervous and relieved at the same time. I get that. He looked at me again more directly now. What about you? What are you feeling? I didn't have to think long. Steady, I said. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Mason let out the softest exhale. I wish I felt that sure. You don't have to be sure, I said. You just have to be honest. His eyes flickered with something deep, fear, hope, longing, all tangled together. Okay, he whispered. Then I'll be honest. I nodded. Go on. He took a breath that shook slightly. I keep looking at you, he said quietly, and thinking, how did I not see this before? How did I not realize how much I wanted you close? My chest tightened. You do want me close, I said. He nodded. Yeah, I really do. I shifted closer without thinking, just an inch, maybe less. But he noticed. God, he noticed. His breath hitched. I want to hold on to this, he murmured. Whatever this is. Me too. He studied my face again, and for a moment everything around us dissolved. It was just him and me, the warmth between us, the quiet hum of something neither of us had words for. Then Mason spoke again, softer than ever. Ethan, he whispered, can I lean on you? My heart clenched, not in pain but in something warm and protective. Yeah, I said. Always. He didn't hesitate this time. He shifted closer until our sides were pressed together from shoulder to knee, his head gently finding its place against my shoulder. I felt the slow release of his breath, like he'd finally let himself rest. I rested my cheek lightly against the top of his head. We stayed like that for a long time. Not talking. Not thinking. Just breathing the same quiet air. Eventually he spoke, voice muffled against me. I didn't know I was waiting for this. What part? This feeling, he said. Being seen. Being understood. Being wanted. I want you, I said softly. Not just tonight. Not just because the moment feels right. I want you, Mason. You. His hand slid down my arm and found mine again, intertwining our fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. I don't know where this is going, he whispered. We don't need to know. Then what do we need? I smiled gently. Just this. Just us. Just being honest. Mason lifted his head slightly, eyes meeting mine, close, warm, full of something fragile and beautiful. I'm really glad I met you, he said. I'm glad you stayed, I replied. He studied me again, voice quiet but certain. I don't think I want to leave. You don't have to, I whispered. And as he leaned back against me, slow, trusting, steady, his fingers tightening around mine like a promise, something settled inside me with quiet certainty. He wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. And neither of us was waiting anymore. We were here. Together. Finally. And for the first time it felt like enough. The night felt like it had folded in on itself and become something quieter, softer. Mason eventually shifted beside me, lifting his head from my shoulder and rubbing his eyes like he was waking from a dream he didn't want to leave. How long were we like that? He asked with a faint smile. I'm not sure, I said. Time got weird. He laughed gently. Yeah, it did. He looked around his living room like it was the first time he'd seen it, like the furniture and walls belonged to a different life, the one before tonight. The lamp cast a warm glow over everything, making the room feel smaller, almost intimate. Almost ours. Mason sighed softly and leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes. I feel peaceful. You deserve to feel that way, I murmured. He cracked one eye open. You make it sound like you're the reason. Maybe I am. He let out a breath that felt more like a surrender. Yeah, he whispered. Maybe you are. After a moment he sat up a little straighter. Can we just talk for a bit? Not about labels or what this is supposed to look like, just us. Of course. He smiled, small but real. Good. Because I think tonight changed something. I nodded. It did. I don't want to pretend it didn't. Neither do I. He looked at his hands for a long moment, then spoke quietly. I think I always wanted connection. Real connection. I just didn't know how to let myself have it. You're letting it happen now. Because it's you, he said simply. You're easy to trust. My chest tightened. I'm glad you feel that way. He looked up again. Do you? Yeah, I said. I trust you. He swallowed and I could see the weight of that hit him. Maybe because trust wasn't something he'd been given easily. Maybe because he wasn't used to giving it either. "Ethan," he said softly, "what do we do now?" I leaned back beside him, letting our shoulders brush. "We keep talking. We keep being honest. We don't rush anything. And we don't pretend this didn't happen." Mason hummed thoughtfully. "Okay. I can do that. And if we get confused," I added, "we figure it out together." He nodded slowly, like he was absorbing each word into his bones. We fell into a comfortable silence, our bodies close but not pressed together. He rested his arm on the back of the couch, and I found myself leaning toward him without meaning to, just enough that my shoulder brushed his ribs. It wasn't a move I planned. Just happened. He noticed. Mason glanced down at my shoulder against him, then at my face, his eyes softening. "You're really here," he murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Good." The quiet stretched again, warm and filled with everything we didn't need to say aloud. After a few minutes, Mason shifted, turning slightly toward me. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "When you came over tonight," he said slowly, "before any of this happened, did you think something was going to change?" "No," I answered honestly. "I just thought you were acting weird." He laughed under his breath. "I was acting weird. I know." He nudged me lightly with his elbow. "Don't get cocky. Too late." He shook his head, but he was smiling now, a soft, genuine smile that I hadn't seen from him before tonight. "But seriously," he said, "when you walked in and I closed the door, it hit me that I wanted something I didn't know how to ask for." "What did you want?" His eyes met mine. "You," he said softly. My breath caught, but I didn't look away. "And now?" I asked quietly. "And now I want to see what this becomes." I nodded, feeling something deep and steady settle into place. "So do I." He exhaled, slow, relieved, like he'd been waiting to hear that. After a moment, his hand slipped down between us, palm open, close enough for me to reach. I looked at it for a second, then set my hand in his. No hesitation. No second guesses. Our fingers intertwined naturally, like we'd done it 1,000 times before. "Feels right," Mason whispered. "It does." He shifted again, leaning slightly into my side. His head rested against my shoulder, not heavy, just present. Close. Safe. We sat like that for a long time, our hands threaded together, our breaths a slow, easy rhythm. The world outside could have been miles away. Eventually he tilted his head up. "Ethan?" "Yeah." "Stay tonight." He didn't say it with expectation. Not with implication. Just hope. Soft, genuine hope. "I'll stay," I said. I didn't even have to think about it. His shoulders dropped in a quiet exhale, and he leaned against me again, this time letting his weight settle fully. We talked for a while longer, about small things, personal things, dreams we never said out loud before. He told me he'd been afraid of being alone forever. I told him I'd been afraid of wanting more than people were willing to give. He told me he'd never felt safe enough to let himself care this deeply. I told him he didn't have to do it alone anymore. The night stretched on, but it never felt heavy. When we finally got up from the couch, Mason reached for my hand again instinctively. His thumb brushed mine once. A simple touch, quiet, tender, grounding. We walked to his bedroom together, not rushed, not nervous, just connected. Just close. He let go of my hand only long enough to pull back the blankets. Then he looked at me with a softness that made my chest ache. "Whatever this becomes," he whispered, "I want it to be real." I stepped closer and touched his arm gently. "It already is." His breath caught, and then he rested his forehead against mine for the second time that night. No urgency. No confusion. Just quiet, intentional closeness. "Good night, Ethan," he murmured. "Good night, Mason." He didn't kiss me. I didn't kiss him. We didn't need to. We slipped under the covers, facing each other, our hands bridging the small space between us. I watched his eyes flutter, watched his breathing slow, watched him relax in a way I'd never seen before. He fell asleep with our fingers still intertwined. And as I listened to the rhythm of his breath in the dark, one thought settled over me, soft and certain. I didn't expect this. I didn't ask for it. But now that it's here, I wouldn't undo it for anything.